Hey there, here we are. Welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock, hard rock, heavy metal, and other forms of rock music. Excuse me. So today we're doing our series video, which is my favorite albums of 1980. This is day 31, the last album, my number one album. It was never going to be in doubt, not since the beginning. I almost, while it was going on, I was thinking, you know what? The album has faded a bit. Maybe I should put number 2 in that spot. And it got down to about the last 5, and I said, nah, it can't happen. It's got to be Permanent Waves, Rush. Not only is this my favorite album of the year, it's also my favorite Rush album from my favorite band. So it's a big hit. It's a big album for me. Had a huge impact on me. I can't even tell you how much of an impact this had on me. So when this album came out, which was early in 1980, I think it was the first album I bought that year. If it wasn't, it was near the beginning of the year I bought it, and I got it almost the day that it came out. Always have at this point in time, I had only a limited kind of involvement with Rush. I had listened to their Fly By Night album that I had rented from the library for about two or 3 weeks. So I had listened to it several times. So I was familiar with the vocals and the drums and the keyboards and not keyboards, guitars and bass in it. I knew that they were all pretty good instrumentalists. The music was interesting and heavy, which I liked. And so I had some familiarity. I also saw, I want to say it was the Midnight Special, or it might have been Don Kirshner's rock concert, in which they played a couple of tracks, and I think it was Xanadu and A Farewell to Kings, or it might have been A Farewell to Kings and Closer to the Heart. That's probably what it was, but I can't remember exactly. I was only 13 at the time. They weren't a band that I had been paying much attention to, so and I remember during watching them on TV how I thought, that guy looks like a girl, man. You know, is that a girl? I don't know if it's a girl or not, right? And especially with his voice being so high, I wasn't sure. You know, I didn't know enough about him. I now know that he was getting he's not a girl. That's just the way he was, you know, and I have no problem with that. Anyways, then in 1980, when I was branching, I had started branching out in the late 70s, like late 78, 79, and 80. I started listening to music other than Kiss because it looked to me and most people in the Kiss circles that Kiss was breaking up because they did those 4 solo albums, and they when they came back in 79 with the Dynasty album, which sounded like the 4 solo albums, I thought, wow, this is not good. So they were taking some hits from, they were not living up to what I wanted. Let's put it that way. The solo albums, well, okay, I didn't mind any of them. Really weren't what I was expecting from them. I thought I would get 4 solid hard rock albums by 4 solid members, and I got none of that, except for Ace Frehley was the only one, really. And then they came back with the Dynasty album, which basically to me sounded like the vocals and the music on the solo albums. So I thought, oh, this is not good. And they came back in 1980 with the Unmasked album, which was not even as good as the Dynasty album. And I was at the end with them at that point. I still liked, don't get me wrong, I didn't mind either of the albums, but I didn't think that they were the Kiss that they used to be. And so I had begun by this time to experiment listening to other music. There was 4 bands that I listened to quite a bit: Black Sabbath, Queen, Rush, and who was the other band? I always know who it is, but I can't think of it. Anyways, there was 4 of them, and Rush was one of them. And then I got this album. And that was it. This album was so good. I listened to it every day for months and months. And then when I got the Black Sabbath album, I was like both of them back and forth. And then Yes had their drama album, which I didn't really take to immediately, but I liked it, but not as much as these two. But this album just brought Rush to the top for me. So at this point in time, Rush was probably, in 1980, they were probably my fourth favorite band coming into the year, which would have meant that it would have been Kiss at the top, and then it would have been probably Black Sabbath, and then it would have likely have been Triumph. Those are the three bands. And Rush was in fourth, and then you probably had maybe Queen in fourth, fifth spot at the time. And Van Halen was on the horizon as well. So these were the bands that were kind of dominating at the time. But this shot Rush to the top. By the end of the year of 1980, after Unmasked came out, they became my favorite band, and they stayed that way for about 2 years, replaced by Yes. But at that time, this album was amazing. I love this album. It's still my favorite one. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the music on it. I mean, other than the album cover, which I like quite a bit, it's kind of a gray cover. So I wore my gray shirt to represent the album and my hat to represent Geddy Lee, who's a huge baseball fan. That's something I have in common with him. So then anyways, there's 6 tracks on this album. And this album is different than its predecessors. But at the time I hadn't listened much to the predecessors other than a little bit to Farewell to Kings, so I wasn't influenced emotionally by that at all. This was kind of my introduction to the band, so I took them as this is Rush's sound. And they had Spirit of Radio, which was a monster hit on the radio, and I loved it. It was my favorite song by Rush for a long time. Free Will, which is another really, really good heavy bass, heavy song. I love the drums on this. I love the lyrics. It's one of my favorite Rush songs to sing as well. Then you got the third track, Jacob's Ladder, which I didn't really care for, but I didn't hate it. It was kind of melodic and pulsating, and I didn't really play it much. You know, that was in the days when I would skip the songs I wanted. Entre Nous was a big hit for me initially as well. Kind of faded over time. Different Strings, I always liked it because it was acoustic, and I always liked the acoustic bits on albums. You know, many of the albums that you'll see, like Just a Game, has that acoustic guitar bit. Close to the Edge has some acoustic at the beginning of And You and I, and then you have like Fragile also has some acoustic bits, and then you've got also with Genesis, they have a fair bit of acoustic stuff on the Trick of the Tail, which was the album that I got first by them. So I always liked that acoustic bit. I thought it was a mandatory in those days that all bands had an acoustic bit on their album. I don't know why. It's kind of like my perception of albums were that you did 3 studio albums and then you immediately put out a live album, because that's what Kiss did, right? So I thought everybody would try to follow that suit, but it turns out that's not the case. And then the final track on here, which is probably now my favorite track on this album and has been for some time. It's just, I liked it at the beginning. It was one of the big 3 tracks on here, Spirit of Radio, Free Will, and Natural Science. And then Natural Science is another one I like to sing, and now it's probably become the most dominant song on this album. It's got to be in my top 5 songs by Rush. Just some really good lyrics, some real heavy drumming, some really interesting sounds from the keyboards, some excellent guitar. Excellent guitar on just about all the tracks, really. I think Alex Lifeson has arrived here as being one of my favorite guitar players. And yeah, just a really super album. This is produced by Terry Brown as well. So long have I liked this album. It's burned out a little bit over the years now because I've played it so much, man. Like it's always been, since the day I got it, it's always been played. You know, even when I moved out, it was one of the albums that, like the Heaven and Hell one, that I got fairly soon after, and then got it in CD almost immediately when I started collecting CDs. And I've been listening to it pretty regularly now for 40 years. The last year or two, because I've been on this channel and doing so much more stuff and listening to so much more music, it hasn't got as much time as it once had. But still, just a fantastic album. Still number 4. And there might become a day when it won't be my favorite Rush album, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this series. This will be the last album to come out on day 31 of my favorite rock albums from 1980. This will be my number 1, no doubt about it. And this series will now end, and we'll be doing something else, but it won't be in November. I'm going to be off for the next 5 or 6 days. I won't be doing anything. I've got some baseball stuff I want to set up, and so I'm going to need the time for that. And then when I come back, it'll be next week. Next Sunday, I'll come back with my my new week this week, and we'll have a whole new roster. And I may be starting something new. It's been in the works. It's at this point in time, I don't really have a title for it, but it'll be focusing on one individual for an episode or two, and just basically going through their musical history and stuff. So it's just something I've wanted to do. I just haven't been sure how to approach it and how I want to do it and what I want to do with it. But I'm going to try and do it on Saturday mornings to replace my music other than rock series that I was doing early on, and then decided that it didn't fit into the channel, and so I what they call X-nate it, right? Anyway, so then so I decided to replace it with this, and when I have more details, which will be this when I do this week, when I start back, when I do the this week episode, I'll explain a little bit more of it before I launch it. And the only other video that will be done now will be the Ben's album challenge for Sunday night, because it's due this week, so I will do that. And I hope you enjoyed this series. We'll be having another series that will come out, but in December, and I think I have a plan of what I want to do. It'll be basically great progressive rock albums of the 1980s. I'm going to try and do it so that I don't do more than one album per band, and we're going to have bands that are bands that may have been established, who had an album in that decade that I liked a lot. There may be a band that were established that I didn't know much of, who may have had an album in that decade. There'll be bands of groups that I had listened to in that decade. I'm going to pick my favorite album from them. And then the last one will be bands that I don't know a damn thing about, never heard the album before, and they're going to come out. But I want to make one correction on that. So the albums I will be choosing for that will not be albums I've listened to before. I may have listened to the band and some of their music before, but the particular album I'm going to choose they're all 31 albums of the month will be albums I've never listened to before. I'm going to listen to them once when I do them. So I'm going to choose 31 albums that I know nothing about, based on what I like and what I've seen or what I think I'm going to like, and I'm going to do them. So there may be some crappy albums here, I'm not sure, but there'll probably be some really good ones. The object of it is to try and get me into some new stuff, get me to listen to some albums I've never listened to before, and give it an honest one-off shot about the albums. That's my goal. So, and how I'm going to do it, since I can't do it in a this is my favorite to my, or my least favorite to my most favorite. I'm not going to do it that way because I don't know the albums. I'm going to probably just do it alphabetically. I'll get the 31 albums, I'll put them all alphabetically, maybe by group, maybe by album, I haven't decided yet, and then I'll just do one each day for the month of December. And this will get more refined as we get closer, but part of the reason I'm not doing anything this month is because I want to spend some time picking the albums I want to do and putting them in the orders I want to do them and refining how I want to do it. I think it'll be a very interesting thing, and it's all going to be progressive. There'll be nothing other than progressive albums here. And that's why we're called the Frog Monsters, because that's the main focus here. And I hope that this will draw some interest. So, anyways, this video has gone on far longer than I wanted to, but you know, it is my favorite Rush album. It is my favorite group. It is my favorite album of 1980. Probably deserves a lot of attention. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, and it's much appreciated. And we'll be back again as soon as we can. Have a good night. Have a good day. Bye.